Hi everyone, I'm Maddie.
And I'm Amber.
And we're
Witches Talking Tarot.
And today is this the last day that we're recording before our break?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So today's the last day we're recording before our little season break, and we're coming at you with a really intense episode on the European witch trials.
Yes.
European. Next
season. So we're ending this season with European witch trials because this will be the last episode. Swamp Monsters is the previous episode. And then we're starting up season 3 with the Salem witch trials. An accurate fucking account, guys. Accuracy matters with history. It's not about your point of view. It's about what really happened, yo. So, I feel like that's a great way to get into it.
I'm
very passionate about history,
I wanted to make a joke, but I didn't know if any of it would be offensive, so I didn't.
Oh. I mean, to me, you're good. If you meant to other people, I don't know.
I meant to other people.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I'm really excited about this topic because, well, first of all, I did a lot of research today, and I learned some things that I didn't really know, like the fact that Germany has the highest number of witch trial deaths.
Well, I would never have guessed that Switzerland went as fucking hard as they did.
They're usually such a peaceful people.
And y'all, England went least hard.
I know.
The people that participated, they were like, we're just going to have a spot of tea with these witches.
You know what? I'm going to say this. I think the reason why you and I and my husband, because I asked him, which one do you think burned the most witches? And he's like, I don't know, England. It's got to be pop culture. Because in pop culture, it's always England, an English kingdom.
Well, that's because everybody's got a beef with England from way back in the day when they owned the whole world.
Right.
Yeah, so we're all like, spot of tea this bitch.
Yeah, you know what? England's actually a pretty small country.
Yeah, to have owned the entire world, it's crazy.
Right. I really... well, and what I was saying was, there's no way that they could have killed 80,000 men and women and, honestly, children probably as well.
I mean, and that is across all of Europe.
All of Europe, not just Germany.
And so, the main participators were France, Germany, Switzerland, England and Scotland.
Honestly,
but
I'm not
Poland got
about
involved.
France.
I heard about these witch trials in the 1700s, and I was like, okay,
my own joke.
You know what? France is off crying in the corner.
I'm not surprised about France. There's just something up with them. France
seems like the place to get burned at the stake. I'm just saying, if you're gonna get burned at the stake anywhere in Europe, it feels like it's gonna be France or Germany, and they were.
Well,
top players. They were the top players.
For me, when I think of France, I just and the witch trials, I don't know why. I can't remember if previous episode, guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Where was Joan of Arc burned?
France.
Okay,
yeah,
so I think that's why I'm not surprised that France had a big thing. Also, they got low key stick up their ass sometimes. No offense to our French listeners, because we. But
we love you.
Amber saved that one. Shut up, Maddie. Stop talking.
I was like, you said we? And I was like, no, keep going. It's French. No.
But I was surprised about Germany. I don't know why I was so surprised. And I was surprised about Switzerland, too. The
Switzerland is the one that... Switzerland's involvement and England's... reservation.
Lack thereof.
Yeah, that's what surprised me the most because, England was a player, y'all. They were more reserved, as the English tend to be. But, the Germany thing, and this could be because of pop culture. The Germany thing doesn't surprise me at all. But also, I'm, over a third Jewish, so...
Well, Amber and I noticed that, we had talked about...
laughing at my own joke, guys. It was a bad joke, but...
Well, a lot of, my misconceptions on the European witch trials has to do with pop culture. Well, but, the Swedes...
But that's also because, I was bitching right before we started recording, and I was bitching about how, a lot of different groups have chosen to misrepresent the way that the witch trials went down or were recorded or what have you, or were represented in retelling to the current eras, right? To get their own agenda taken care of with what happened in the past. And that is why I find fault with it, because then it leaves people like me and you with these enormous misconceptions, because we've been led to believe something by somebody who had an agenda, which is why, guys, I will say it once, I will say it a million times, educate yourselves. That's what I love about this podcast, is we do educate ourselves a whole lot, and we find out the things that we have misconceptions about.
Right? Like,
and then
I'm
we try to
sure
share it with you guys.
You and I, or at least I, thought Joan of Arc was fucking burned as a witch.
Well,
and that wasn't even the fucking case.
Well, and when I originally looked into Joan of Arc a long time ago, I did think that she had been burned as a witch. That's why I looked into her. That's why I knew she hadn't been burned as a witch. But
well, and it's funny because in the research that I did with the European witch trials, it said the most famous witch to be burned in the European witch trials was Joan of Arc, but she wasn't even burned as a witch. That was literally the whole sentence.
Well,
but she wasn't even necessarily burned as a witch.
They did cover that fact. Okay, because I was like, she wasn't burned as a witch.
No, like the whole sentence was, but she wasn't even,
misconceptions.
Yeah, so I was really proud of the article.
Yeah. That's super tight of them, because I am impressed.
So the Switzerland. Is that sweet? Why am I calling them Swedes? That's
that
Swedish.
would be Sweden.
What the fuck?
Swiss. The Swiss.
Okay,
chocolate.
The Swiss.
Swiss Miss?
I think cheese.
Oh my God, Swiss Miss. Never think of Swiss Miss the same again, y'all. Maybe it's witch ashes.
Oh God, what's
Don't
Swiss
sue
Miss?
us. Is Swiss Miss the chocolate cocoa? Hot cocoa powder?
Oh, that's why it's called Swiss Miss, because it's Swiss chocolate. Okay, wow.
I thought you were going to say because it's Swiss witches.
Oh, no. I was just like, how did that go over my head? But anyway, so Switzerland, what was the name of the town?
It was Valais.
Can't really pronounce. If you're listening in Switzerland, please let us know how to pronounce it. But they had the first...
But thanks for Switzerland people who listen, because who'd have thunk I wouldn't have.
Right.
But we have you. Thank you.
They had the first systematic witch hunt.
The first big one.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was the first piece of a big domino effect throughout Europe for the next couple hundred fucking years.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, hundreds of people went to trial. Hundreds of people were killed. They don't even know how many people died in the jails during just awaiting trial for being a witch. But here's the thing. None of them were witches, guys. Like, let us be
You know what? With
clear.
the amount of people, I just want to say, with the amount of people who were burned and hanged and beheaded, from what I read, it was at least 80,000 people. The odds of there being a real witch within them, I think there could have been.
I don't
one
think
or
so.
two.
Not during the era
80,000?
of history. It's completely oversaturated with strict Christian rules. It's strict Puritanism. It's strict Reformation. It's strict Holy Roman Empire. Like, it's nice to think that there were underground witches, but for the most part, like, if you weren't a practicing Puritan, like, if you weren't a practicing Christian during that time frame, that would have been like, that was everything to a person back then. They're like, the church was everything back then. That's why it was so easy for the witch hunts to spread like wildfire.
So you don't think there could have even been 1 in 80,000?
I do not believe that anybody who was a true practicing witch was somebody that was put on trial. I do not believe that, because during that time frame, if there was anybody who was working with herbs in a manner that they knew would fall under the guise of witchcraft, they would have been so low profile, their neighbors never would have accused them. They never would have suspected them.
I am going to have to, with my personal opinion, disagree, just because 80,000 is a huge number. It doesn't.
But I mean,
seem
that's over the course of
possible.
hundreds of years.
Yeah.
80,000 from the 1400s through the 1800s.
It just doesn't seem possible that within that amount of number that not even one could have been a witch.
I don't believe it.
I definitely.
It was all innocent Puritan women from everything I've ever read. Like,
well, I'm sure. But I personally think there could have been one or two real witches that were actually burned. That's just me. Yeah. That number is too high to say no. I
don't believe it just based on the time frame of when they lived, and like I've read so many different historical documentations about these things that it's like. I mean, I'm sure they would never, have an actual historical document. This is my own personal, belief on it. I don't think there's any historical documents to back me up. My thing is that if you were somebody who was practicing the craft during the time frame that the witch hunts were happening, you would not be practicing remotely, openly enough to put yourself in a position of being one of the people that is accused of witchcraft. Because the women that were accused of witchcraft, because it was 80% women, right? Except Iceland, mostly men.
Well, I'm sure that they would have been completely underground 100%, but it didn't matter if you were practicing or not. If someone thought you were practicing or not, they chose a lot of random women. And
it wasn't so much random. It was the burdens on society. A lot of them were widows. Most of them were over the age of 40. When you're over the age of 40, between 1400 and 1800, what are you giving to society as a woman with no husband? I mean,
and that's where it comes to play that midwives. I mean, there are these are women who.
Well, and what I read that a lot of the herb crafting women and a lot of the midwives were not the people that were being sent to jail as witchcraft suspicion or suspects. They were some of the people pointing the fingers. And that surprised the hell out of me because one of the misconceptions that has been put out there about the European witch trials is that men were now taking over medicine, which is true. And they wanted to get the herb crafting women out of the way, right? And so as a result, those were the people who were put to death, but the records show that the people who were put in prison and put to death were not herb crafting women. They were not the midwives. They were 40-year-old widows who would have to beg for money or beg for firewood or beg for food, and their neighbors didn't like them because they were a burden.
Well, and then again, the number being so high, the possibility that an herb crafter was put to death.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying there wasn't any. I'm saying the majority were not the people that were being put to death. Because, I personally came into this research with the belief that women were, okay, so part of my personal belief on this whole thing is that once the church took over everybody's lives, right, they put in place lots of things that took out pagan practices of herb use, right? And medicinal herbs, right? So we're no longer keeping ourselves healthy and clean with the herbs that we once did, which is why disease is more rampant, right? So now your kids get sick and die more easily. Not necessarily because of witches, but because we're not living the life
because lack thereof.
Exactly. Fucking exactly, because lack thereof, right? But when you're a Puritan who now in the 1300s it got introduced into play that there are diabolical individuals who make a pact with the devil to perform ill will against their neighbors. Now all of a sudden when your baby dies, it's that lady down the road doesn't like me. She looked at me dirty while I was pregnant, and that's the reason baby Annabelle died. Not because we have dirty water and we don't clean ourselves like we should have, or like we used to when we used to bathe with herbs ritually and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But from what I read for the research, it specifically said that that's just propaganda, that herb women were the majority of who was put to death. I'm not saying none of them were accused of witchcraft,
they weren't
but
necessarily the majority.
The majority were widows who were a problem for society to deal with.
I think that people are shitty. And I think
agree.
people have always been shitty. And I think if you really look at it and you really open your eyes and you see it as people, because when we look back at history, it's hard to imagine these people as like more than two-dimensional people, like as three-dimensional people. Back then, people were doing a lot of bad things that wasn't in the Bible, and that was against the Bible. They were doing it anyway. History would tell us that they weren't. History would tell us that they were great, pure Christian people. But the reality is, there was a lot more sex. There was a lot more alcohol. There was a lot more abuse.
I mean, what's the oldest profession?
I mean, dead ass.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of... The history is a lot darker when you really look at it as people, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? No, for sure. Like, when you look at it through a human lens versus words on a page, it is a lot darker. And you're not wrong. Like, I agree with everything. Because, like, that having these rules that they're supposed to live by, that they're not living by, right? So they have this great amount of guilt. Everybody that was alive had so much fucking guilt, right? And so for the people accusing their neighbors of witchcraft, it's their guilt coming out because, like, they're not being good Christian neighbors. They're not helping these women who have no livelihood, who have no way to feed their children. They're not doing the right thing. Right? So it's easier to get rid of them.
It is.
Than to feel guilty. Right. And that's what people do nowadays anyway. I'm sorry, but if you're around...
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
When you're around, let's say, a child, and you did that child wrong. They're an adult now. And you did that child wrong. And you know you did that child wrong. But instead of taking accountability and saying, hey, I wronged you as a kid. I'm sorry, my bad. It's easier to be like, I'm never going to talk to you again. You know what I mean? Yep. It's so much easier to just get rid of something.
Yeah, like,
you know, you can't kill people nowadays, so it's easier to just like cut them the fuck off.
Right? And it was sanctioned killing. I mean, it was an easy ass way to get rid of your problems.
Absolutely. Like nowadays there's lots of people who identify as witches or are out of the closet and their family doesn't agree with it. So, we're going to completely cut your ass off.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. So, the witch trials, okay, I firmly believe are also a systematic way that men put women down, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
I saw this TikTok, and it was really interesting. So, this lady opens up, and she's like, all right, I need y'all to pay attention to what this woman's about to say. And then she stitches in this other video. And this woman's talking about, like, the way that white women are portrayed as vanilla and we're portrayed as people who can't stick up for ourselves and who can't do anything by ourselves and whatever. It's because for generations and generations and generations and generations and generations and generations, our mothers raised us to be fucking quiet and vanilla so that we wouldn't get locked up for hysteria because we read too many books. Because in the 1950s, you could lock your wife up for reading too many fucking books.
Oh my God, yeah.
You could lock your wife up for having a contrary point of view for menopause.
Postpartum.
Exactly. Anything. You could lock your wife up in a mental asylum and be fucking
You could
done
get
with
your
her.
wife lobotomized for a very long time.
Exactly. And our mothers raised us to be vanilla as shit
and
so
quiet.
that we wouldn't be fucking falling victim to, let's face it, the patriarchy, right?
Blessed are the meek.
Right. So when your neighbors could be like, she's too outspoken, she's a witch. Why are you going to be outspoken in public anymore? You know what I mean? Like, it was a way to control women as a whole, no matter what their class was. You could control wealthy women. You could control poor women. You could control all women by a fear of, if I am too unpleasant, someone will accuse me of being a witch. And I have no way to prove that I'm not. And when you're downtrodden, you have all these thoughts, right? Okay, so we just recently learned that not everybody has the
inner monologue.
An inner monologue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if nowadays not everybody has an inner monologue, back then not everybody had an inner monologue, right? So what about the people who have an inner monologue and they're a downtrodden lady and they think bad things about their neighbors who have it better than them? Because if you look at when the women were accused of witchcraft, right? At first they denied that they were a witch, right? Mm-hmm. And then after being tortured, they start giving these crazy ass confessions. Like, I caused my neighbor's pig to die.
Dude, one of the, like, a lot of them confessed to having sex with Satan.
Oh, yeah, that
okay,
was
look,
totally...
you can't motherfucking tell me, because the reality is we're living in Westeros, okay? Like, I'm just saying, we pretty much are. You can't tell me that them motherfuckers torturing them people weren't doing some off-the-wall fucking shit with them women.
Right.
So they're like, I bet you like this, huh? I bet you let the devil do this.
Oh, my God.
Yep. Maybe I'm just fucked up.
Well,
maybe
no,
I'm just,
because-
like, my head's just fucked up, but
well,
you know.
like, okay, so in the 1300s is when they they put that thing into play where there are actual witches who enter into diabolical pacts with Satan, and the way that they do that is through sexual acts.
Yep.
And once they've had sex with Satan, now they're like brides of Satan. They've forsaken God, and they receive imps, and the imps feed on them.
Oh, yeah.
Unnatural teats, right?
Which would be like a
Like a skin
a
tag.
mole or a skin tag.
Or because they don't have very good hygiene, because they stopped following the pagan ways of keeping themselves clean with like herbed water and oils and stuff, and now like they pollute the whole earth because like the Bible said the earth was here for them to do what the fuck they pleased with, so that's what they started fucking doing. So shame on that book, I'm just saying. But like when you're not cleaning, like they probably had like boils and like weird, because they slept on hay.
Oh,
they
my
had
God.
bugs all over them all the time because that was just a fact of life. Like I once read a fantasy novel where like it was a guy that had gone from our time back in the past, and he was like a knight in a world where dragons were real and stuff. It was a really cool book.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was called The Ruby Knight, and it was like one of a series, and there were like other knights, like the Diamond Knight and bullshit. I don't fucking know. It doesn't matter. It's not the point of this. The point of this is he was talking about how people drank wine all the fucking time, right? Because the water is not okay to drink, right? So they're drinking wine all the time, and they're staying fucked up.
Oh, hell
and he's
yeah.
like, but that's okay because you can't feel the lice and the fleas bite you as much when you're that fucking drunk. And that is why, you know, even the kids were fucking drunk. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't sleep under those conditions. You know what I mean?
Right.
And what's funny is there was a time before that when you could. So it's like we literally gave up the knowledge of betterness to follow that book. So anyway, there was a point to where I was going with that.
We were talking about the torture.
So when you're being tortured, right, and you've got these thoughts where, like, you're mad at the lady who lives down the lane because she has a better life than you.
So then you come forward
So
with
then
your
you come-
thoughts.
Exactly, and you're like, I sent my imps. And a lot of them say, I allowed my imps. Like, so the devil's minions want to do bad, but these witches have to give them permission. And I fully believe that the torturers planted that idea in their head, and that just became a part of it. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, why else would you be like, I let my imp Joe Bob? Because they gave the imps had the weirdest fucking names, because, like, these people still lived in a magical time, but, like, by magical, I mean superstitious. So, like, this black mouse that always comes in their house that they can't get rid of, that's an imp from Satan. And, you know, in their delirium after being tortured and kept awake through torture, you know, what the fuck are they going to say to make it stop?
And I'm sorry, I'm speechless, because I just read, and I won't get into it, but I clicked on a link while Amber was here, some of the torture devices and things that they did to people. It's insane. People are bad And they are. I mean, they still do shit like that today.
They do. But
it's just, it's...
What would you say to make it stop? Would you sell out your mother, dear audience? Would you sell out your sister?
I think a lot of people would be like, no, I never would. But the reality is you're probably never going to be in that situation, and you don't know the horrors.
But also, you don't know the, like, you'll never be in that situation because we don't live in that world anymore.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And, like, to them... The imaginings that they had, like a lot of them, they were widows, right? Mm-hmm. And so like their confessions,
I'm sure they were lustful. They were widows. They didn't have men, so they were like, yeah, I wanted to fuck my neighbor's husband. That's normal. I mean, it is though.
Right, it is.
I mean, it's not normal to want to fuck your. Well, right, it's normal to have those thoughts. Like, damn, he's hot.
Exactly. You know? Or like, I miss my husband coming into bed with me. So they imagine that they have a nighttime lover. Now they're being accused of witchcraft. They have all this Puritan or reformist guilt in their fucking heads. So what are they going to say? Satan tricked me into fucking him. Not in those words because they didn't say fucking, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's so sad because it's psychological torture on top of everything else.
It really was. I mean, because these guys, these witch finders, these witch hunters... They have the church at their back, and back then the church was everything to people. Like, even the kings followed the church, you know what I mean? Like, when the kings and the church got into fights, that's where we had fucking wars, you know what I mean?
It was definitely a dark time in history, honestly. It was I don't even want to say it was more horrific than I originally thought it was, because I always knew it was horrific, but I think actually doing the research and seeing it and seeing how putting it into like seeing them as people versus, you know,
to me it is more horrific because I do truly believe that no actual witch got caught up in it. It was all innocent women. It was
and men. And children, honestly.
Yes. It was all innocent people who truly followed the Bible. So how much more of a slap in the face is it to have that be your downfall?
I just am going to rant here for a minute and say...
Go for it.
I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but if God is real, why let his people... You know, I'm not comparing it to the Holocaust, but at the same time... You've got the European witch trials. These are his loyal people.
You could.
You know, you know. And then you've got like things like the Holocaust. These are his followers, his people. The Jews being... Jesus was a Jew. These... Why? And then people come back at it with free will, and it's just... How many of those women and children and men prayed...
For salvation, yeah, exactly. No, absolutely, because that is why it is more heartbreaking for me. Because,
I'm getting heated. I want to hit someone.
You know, I already went through it when I learned the truth behind the Salem witch trials. Teaser, we'll be back in September. But, like, learning that everybody was, like, so innocent. Like... So innocent. Like, they're just a burden on society, so they're going to be going down as the fucking martyrs, basically. Like, you know, because you brought up the mini ice age earlier, right? So one of the contributing factors to this all being a thing that happens is there was a mini ice age. So the temperatures were lower, and they had problems with their crops. And so what's easy then well, it's not even just what's easy. Back then... If you did good, God shined upon you. And if you didn't do good, God didn't shine upon you. So when the crops for the whole community fail, obviously we have a witch in our midst, and God is punishing us because we haven't rooted her out.
And this came through during the Black Plague as well. I mean, who else to blame other than a witch?
Right.
But, like, oh, shit, what was I going to say?
Which was made worse, like we mentioned in our episode on Black Cats, because it was made worse, the plague, because they associated the plague with witches and cats with witches. So they fucking killed cats. Who could have helped the plague not be so bad? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Go listen to that episode.
You mentioned the Salem witch trials, and I have to say, I think, in my opinion, the European witch trials were so much more horrific just because in Salem, as you'll learn in the future, they didn't burn people. In Europe, they burn people alive.
Well, but most of the time, what I read, they mostly strangled them or beheaded them before they were burned.
Yes, but there are cases where people were burned alive, like Joan of Arc. Even though she wasn't burnt as a witch, she was still burned alive.
Yeah.
There were also...
You said that they put gunpowder bags around their necks,
yeah.
so it would blow their head off to kill them
what
quicker.
the fuck? Okay, so that was like...
That's horrific
That
as
was
shit.
them, quote-unquote, showing mercy, was they would put gunpowder either in their pockets or as necklaces around their neck, so that when it lit up, they would literally blow the fuck up. They're not even America, because I was gonna say eagle screech, but like they're not even in America, so this isn't isn't even an excuse. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, and like
they
for
had a
me,
fireworks
like,
show.
I'm like, I don't want to be like, oh, let's argue which is worse, because like the Salem witch trials were bad enough as they were, but because the European witch trials have a 400-year span, they are just in general more horrific. That more loss of life, more communities and families devastated. Like the account of one lady that was talking about after the one in Switzerland where 71 people were all killed. She said like the families would, like, some people passed out on the way to being killed, so their families had to like carry them to their death.
Can you imagine the smell?
Oh God, I can't.
I'm sorry, not to be all graphic, but the fucking smell.
Oh, yeah, I don't even. I
mean, I'm sure it was stanky anyway back then.
But yeah, right. I wonder. It just all bad. But the families, when they're leaving the fucking the execution, they were just numb. Is what she said. Like the person who was retelling the tale for somebody who was writing it down, and it was like they were just like fucking numb. And it's like, can you imagine? Because if you think about it, in the witch trials, sometimes there was like a wife and a daughter and a granddaughter, or so. Like sometimes it was generations. Sometimes it was like a mom and all her fucking kids. Sometimes it was a kid having to tell. Being coerced into saying their parent is a witch so that they won't get burned as a witch, or honestly, hung as a witch,
this episode
or floated as a witch.
This episode is a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Oh, I knew it would be hard, but like
I knew it would be hard, but it's harder than I thought it would be. Sorry, damn, Amber. Gee. Yeah, I knew it would be hard. Please don't misunderstand. But like, you say people would pass out on the way. That terrifies me, because again, putting it into perspective, I made myself pass out on the way to my C-section because I was so afraid. My first C-section, I made myself pass out. So I'm imagining that time when I made myself pass out and they were carrying me or pushing me into the room. I can imagine exactly what those people were going through. Maybe not, because I didn't die, but I thought I could or was going to. But I imagine it but tens and hundreds of thousands of times worse than that.
Me,
that's just how I'm relating that to
they're
that.
Constantly praying to God to like, please show them the way. Show them I'm not a witch. Show them I'm a follower of God. You know what I mean?
And he's not there.
But also, here's the other sad aspect, right? The ones that the witch hunters have convinced they truly are a witch. So they're like, I deserve to die because I'm evil and I'm going to hell.
And that's where the psychological torture to me comes in.
But that also is terrifying to me spiritually, because you go where you believe you're going to go, in part of my spiritual belief. So if they've been convinced that they're an evil witch,
they're going to go willingly.
They're going to go to fucking hell and be tortured because that's what they believe is going to happen to them now. And it didn't have to be that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. Like, it's a hard... Like, both of them are hard. And for me, the hardest part is everybody was innocent. Oh. But also... Okay, let's, like, even if some witches did get killed, right? It's all based on Exodus 22:18, which was a bastardization of a fucking translation. And instead of using the word poisoner, they put in the word witch.
Oh, I know. My quote unquote family member actually sent my husband that exact quote when they found out that I was a witch, and that was terrifying. Because, bitch, are you threatening me?
Right? Like
I'm not
thou
kidding.
shalt not suffer a witch to live is what Facebook pages that claim to be witch hunters.
No, I am dead ass,
page.
you guys. I am
Yeah,
dead ass,
no.
not joking. Like,
Yeah,
my
no.
husband got that fucking message, and that is terrifying as a witch, because witch hunters do still exist, and maybe it's not like the European witch trials now, and maybe it's not like the Salem witch trials now, but things like that do fucking happen. It's just not necessary. And you know what? Let's pretend it's not in Europe and not in or not in America. Shit like that happens all over the fucking world. Africa.
Yeah, in the last 10 years, over 3,000 people in Africa have been killed by moths.
They do it in
Mexico.
Mexico, the rural areas in Mexico,
I was
South America.
If we wanted to do a separate episode on current era.
Oh hell yeah, we got a trilogy. We got a trilogy, y'all. We got European, Salem, and
then present day.
Because it does still happen. It does. So the fact that my husband got that, it actually is terrifying. It actually fucking is.
I've never mentioned it on our show, but I mentioned it when we were on Petals of Support with Mama D, so go check out the Sleepovers with the Witches. I once got a friend request on Facebook on my personal page from somebody who pretended to be pagan to get friends that were pagan. And because of being the local coordinator for Pagan Pride Day, if it's a pagan person requesting me on Facebook, I always accept it in case it's about PPD. But then this guy, 10 days later, changed his profile, and he's anti-witch, sharing that shalt not suffer a witch to live Bible quote, super crazy. And he flip-flops back and forth, which is crazy. And I can't remember if you've mentioned on this show or not, but you've gotten some crazy-ass requests for a tarot reading from somebody.
So look, this was either a trafficker or
I still think it was a witch hunter.
A witch hunter, but this person was begging me to meet him because I give tarot readings. We're Witches Talking Tarot, right? He wanted to have a tarot reading in person. He had money in hand. He was sending pictures of his money. Please meet me in person. I've never met a witch before, blah, blah, blah. Obviously.
Again, witch hunter. I'm sorry. Maybe it was a sex trafficker, but I still think it was a witch hunter.
I mean, look, good example in pop culture, American Horror Story. That shit really happens.
Good example in real America, that stupid preacher that...
Oh my god! He's like,
what's his face?
We got 6 witches in
we
this.
We know who you are.
Oh my god, I can't believe
you came after my wife and we're gonna root you out. We already know who you fucking are.
He's like, we've got your name, we've got your address, and if you don't get up and leave right now...
we're gonna find you.
We're gonna publish it. Yeah, dude, no, literally.
That was
crazy. Like in Tennessee.
He's famous. He is famous.
Have you seen?
And he promotes killing witches.
Have
and
you
witches
seen
out.
the TikToks though of the witches? They're like when your grandma forces you to go to church, and they're just chilling, and he's like, "We got the names of 6 witches," and they're like. He's like, your sage burning ways,
bitch. It says in the Bible, to honor God, you have to burn herbs. Burned herbs. God wants burned herbs. Read the Bible.
You know what?
This witch did. Why haven't you? Sorry, that burns me.
No, it's okay. But oh my god. Oh my god, a t-shirt that burns me in a picture.
Oh my god, us!
It's us and our faces on
we're in oranges and yellows instead of pinks and purples. Oh my god.
Okay, but seriously though, even if that specific person was just a hater and a shitty person, if they did choose to publish those people's names and addresses like he threatened, he opens the way for actual violence. Actual witch hunting.
It's also rude. But yes, that is more serious.
Yeah,
you're going the serious route.
Rude,
sorry
but
for making
seriously,
a joke.
You know what I mean?
It's bad. It's scary. It's legitimately scary. We've never actually talked about this on our show, only on Mama D's show. That's weird.
Yeah, I know, but
I guess we were waiting for a witch hunt episode.
It's really sad.
It is.
That, the truth of the matter is people haven't really learned much during that.
No, I know, because
and if they could legally get away with the shit that they did during the European witch trials, I absolutely believe they would. And I unfortunately believe some of my quote-unquote family would be those people.
Well, and to me, it's just terrifying that, like you said, they haven't learned. But, like, under torture, people admitted to things, and they sold other people out under torture. Horrible torture. You can Google it yourselves. Nobody seemed interested in us sharing it on the show ever, so we're just talking about, like, the trials themselves. But, like, when you're in a culture, you live in a culture where, like, everything is taboo. Literally, human nature itself is taboo. How can you avoid feeling bad about being human? Because that, in a way, that's kind of one of the things that the witch hunt boils down to. You're supposed, like, it's literally attacking being human. Holy shit.
Well, I mean, that specific belief is honestly attacking being human as a whole, because you want to look at the commandments, which we could do a whole fucking episode on that, but one of them being like, thou shalt not covet. It is fucking human nature to be jealous. People are jealous. We are jealous people.
We are.
Thou shalt not lie. People do it all the time. Right. Again, it's human
Sometimes
nature.
It's done out of consideration to spare your feelings. It doesn't necessarily make it okay, but, like, that's why we have that term, little white lie, right?
Right. Well, and
I'm not condoning lying, guys. It always gets out of control. Don't get me wrong.
Like you mentioned, you know, these were widows who were probably, quote unquote, suffering. Why do I keep saying quote unquote? I'm sorry, guys. But, like, who were suffering from lustful urges. No, they was just horny, and that's human nature because we're meant to reproduce. And, yeah, maybe they did think their sister's husband was hot or something.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, like, maybe they thought he was hot, but because, like, from my understanding, sex for a Puritan woman or a reformist woman, that probably sucked. But, like,
actually, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Please check out Kinky History, the podcast. This is a historic woman who has studied sex throughout the ages. She's a historian, and she is so cool, and you'd be fucking surprised at some of the shit the Puritans did. Like, she is so cool. It's called Kinky History. Please look this shit up.
I will, because I love history.
Oh, like, I love it.
My kink, so
I was shocked at the amount of things that...
But, like, they would have coveted the security that a husband provides. You know what I mean?
Well, and let's say, for example, your sister's husband grapes you. And you're being tortured. Did you have sex with so-and-so? Are you lustful? You're being tortured. You're automatically going to be like, oh, my God, I had sex with him.
Right.
You know, and then you're going to confess even though it's not your fault.
Right, exactly. And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like the European witch hunts and witch trials were really, really, really spurred on by guilt. Both guilt of the people who were not living by the Bible like they should have been. Because if these are your disadvantaged community members, why are they not being taken care of? Like, why is the church not putting some of the tithing toward the needy community members? Why are the people who are prospering not helping take care of those who have run into something bad happening to them? Like,
they still don't.
I know, but, like, to me, like, that's what living in a community is all about. And when the church is going to come in and say, you can't live communally anymore, you can't live in the society you're used to anymore, Ireland or Scotland or Britain back in the day or any of the other places that the fucking church came in and said, you have to live differently, you have to live like we say, and we say you have to live this way, but we're only going to enforce the parts that we care about as far as fucking controlling you goes. So, like, when you're not going to take care of the women who are needy or the children who are needy because this man died as a part of your community, but we used to live in communities that they would take care of the disadvantaged. You know what I mean? Like, that is where I have a point, but basically, like, that's where my rage at the situation comes in, is it never should have happened in the first place, but especially not under the guise of being good Christians. Because I feel like their guilt at not being good Christians spurred on the witch hunts to happen, and those women said the crazy ass shit they did because they were easily able, under the torture and the lack of sleep, because, like, have you ever, like, not slept? Like, the hallucinations.
I had 2 newborns, 2 under 2.
Well, no, I mean, like,
what,
so
2 newborns.
Well, yeah, I understand that too, but I mean, like, so I've gone where, like, I've done a road trip that was, like, 3 days long, and we agreed we weren't going to go to sleep during the road trip. So, like...
What the fuck?
36 hours in... Yes, young people are stupid. 36 hours in, like, the fucking clouds are like puppies chasing kittens because I'm fucking hallucinating.
I read that, like, teenagers used to do that to get high. I don't know if they still do that, where they make themselves stay up so they hallucinate, because it does provide this almost, like, high type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because your brain's going through all this crazy shit.
But I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street way too many fucking times for that shit, because when they're trying to stay awake, but they're slowly kind of, like, hallucinating and fall asleep. Fuck that! Like, I can't do that shit.
I'm sorry, I love that. But... You know, when you are so sleep deprived, you can hallucinate, right? And somebody's torturing you. You can probably, like, see all this crazy shit.
You can probably see a demon, see the devil behind them. Yes.
You absolutely can. And I mean, and you've got all this guilt built up in you because you're not a good Christian woman, because you were angry at your neighbor who didn't give you what you wanted. And so now you're like... You've got this quote-unquote hate in your heart that must have manifested in his calf dying. You know what I mean?
Yep. Because
it was just a perfect storm. And as you'll see next season when we bring you the Salem Witch Trials, which, oh my God, I can't wait to read Stacy Schiff again. I love that book. I'm so excited. But you'll see, like, that was a perfect storm. Completely different way, though. I don't know. I just, like, I feel like the mini Ice Age and the multiple different denominations of Christians who thought they were the holiest really fed into.
And I think that, you know, pagans have a way of creating stories and gods and different things to explain why things happen. Christians don't really, or at least Puritans, didn't really have that same thing to be able to be like, oh, it's snowing because the god of, or because Demeter is upset, because Persephone's not here. Instead, they said, oh, it must be snowing and because God is angry because of this. Right. They didn't have that wide ability to. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, because they... So I once read that the reason that Christianity was able to take over so easily, or the Abrahamic religions in general, because people were worshiping all these different deities that they did different things for, whatever. Having one God to please was way fucking easier.
Yeah.
But then when stuff goes wrong, it's like, it's because we didn't follow God right enough. Right? So it's like what you said, it's snowing and our crops are dying even though it's April and there should be no snow. Well, God is angry because we have let sin in our midst. And then you have to pick out what the sin is. And it can't be my sin because I'm a pious man, right?
Right.
So it's got to be the sin of this lowly woman whose husband can't retaliate against me because he's not here.
Right.
But also I read there was like an exponentially large amount of single women during the time, and like
the witch trials
like the
plague,
like a fifth of them.
Right. Well, and there's the plague and people are dying, and it's
malnutrition because of the mini Ice Age. Like it was a perfect storm. But like it's so sad.
It is sad.
It's
so
like,
do you guys know anything about the European witch trials that we didn't mention? And please don't give us any detail on the tortures, because that was terrible. Yeah,
I already know. I'm good. I know what I know, and I don't want to know anything.
I don't want to know anymore. Yeah.
I already know what I know.
So please don't say that's what you know that we didn't mention, because we just don't.
Oh shit, we forgot to mention, so like don't come at us with like, well, the European witch trials happened because the witch finders needed to keep that shit going, so they had a job. We do know that. We talked about it off air, so it didn't make it on air. My bad.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're good. No, I just was like, we didn't actually talk about that on this. We should probably do that right now before anybody's like, y'all missed the point. No,
right.
We understand. Like that's why the desire was for women to name other people, because then there's more witches to try. More money for the witch finders, more money for the jailers, more money for everybody but the poor people who already didn't have shit.
Right.
I don't know.
If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Last I checked, we are 5 away from reaching our goal of 100 subscribers. We would love to come back for season 3 with 100 subscribers. Woo!
Fuck yeah, and more patrons. Hello,
Yes.
Melissa. And
Hey,
Victoria.
Melissa and Victoria. If you want to support us while we're on our little season break, please check us out.
Yeah, well, also, if they support us during our little season break, they'll actually get the few things that go out during our break because we have Patreon exclusive episodes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We are on Twitter at Classiest Witches, Instagram at WitchesTalkingTarot, as well as Facebook at WitchesTalkingTarot.
Thanks for coming to sit with us, Spell. I guess I'll be editing that out. Bye, YouTube.